I'm recording. Okay.
Recording in progress.
Yes, perfect. We got that confirmation in a robot voice.
Recording in progress.
Yeah. You did really good. And a quick note for my Russian-speaking listeners. Ребят, это интервью изначально записывалось на английском, и оно полностью на английском. Но если вам хочется послушать его на русском языке, то в телеграм-канале подкаста уже есть переведенное интервью полностью с переозвучкой на русский язык. Поэтому, если вам удобнее слушать на русском, пожалуйста, приходите в телеграм-канал, ссылка будет в описании. Hi everyone, and welcome to Кем я стал, когда вырос podcast, the podcast about career journeys. I'm your host, Ina, and together with people from various fields, we explore what they do, what their work is actually like, and how they got there. If you listen to this channel regularly, you know that this is usually a Russian language podcast. But today we have something completely new, a bonus track recorded in English. In the recent special, when I was talking to language teachers, we discussed one of the biggest fears many students have, the fear of speaking. People worry their English isn't good enough or that their accent sounds wrong, it distracts natives when they listen to them. So I decided to tackle this head-on and use this bonus episode to show on my own example that language is a tool for communication. You can talk to anyone, even a native speaker, and you will be understood and appreciated. It's about taking the leap and connecting. But for now, get ready for a conversation that I hope will inspire you to try speaking English more often. And of course, this conversation was a personal challenge for me too. To do this, I invited someone who has helped literally millions of people gain their confidence to speak English. Luke Thompson, the creator and host of
Luke's English Podcast. For more information, visit teacherluke.co.uk.
Hi Luke, and welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. It's a pleasure to be asked to be on someone else's podcast for a change, rather than just on my own. It's nice. I feel like I'm a passenger in a car, rather than the one driving and having to make sure I don't crash. I can just sit in the passenger seat.
Perfect. So you're in charge for all these funny stories the passengers tell the driver all along the way to make them not sleep.
Right, exactly. So I have to keep you entertained with silly stories and things. Okay, I'm ready.
Perfect. Thank you. And the first question, it is always in the same form. Who did you become when you grew up?
Well, I became a teacher. I became an English teacher, which I didn't expect. And I guess I also became a podcaster. And when I was a kid, I had no idea what that was, because obviously podcasts didn't exist. But I became one somehow. And also, I became this guy who lives in Paris and who has 2 kids and does stand-up comedy and things like that, which also is unexpected. I never thought I would end up doing that, really. But there you go. I suppose we never really know what we're going to become. Maybe some people do. Maybe some people think to themselves, right, I'm going to be a fireman, and then they become a fireman. But I never really knew. I still don't know what I'm doing, really.
But you're doing it fine.
I'm doing it okay, apparently, yes. It's going all right. I'm having a great time.
And how long have you been teaching?
I've been teaching since around 2001, so that's getting on nearly 25 years of being an English language teacher for adults.
That's impressive.
I've taught kids a little bit as well, but mostly it's been adults. Yeah, so nearly 25 years now.
That's actually insane. I'm 29. Oh my God.
Yeah. No, I'm old. I'm a wise old man now. I'm a wise old man sitting on a mountain or something.
So yeah, actually you mentioned the podcast, and I'm a huge fan of Luke's English podcast. So now it feels even a little bit strange that not only can I hear Luke in my headphones, which is not surprising at all, but Luke can also hear me, which is not the case when I'm trying to answer all your questions talking to my headphones like a weirdo listening to another episode,
Yeah.
Anyways, first of all, before we move to questions about learning and teaching and stuff, I've always wondered, what does it feel like to speak the most widely used international language, like in Europe at least, almost from the moment of your birth? Not exactly, but still, at a native level.
Mm.
Probably you've never struggled with conditionals in your life, haven't you?
Well, not in the same way that you have, but I've certainly had to struggle with English grammar a lot in my life.
That wasn't your favorite subject, right?
Well, no, not until I became a teacher, and then I kind of, you had to get into it. We can come on to that, but how does it feel to speak English as your native language? I didn't really realise it was anything special until I became an English teacher and I met people from around the world, all of whom needed to learn the language. Yeah, so obviously I feel very privileged to have English as my first language, and I feel very lucky to have it as my first language. So definitely it's a privilege, let's say. It also can be a curse in some ways. Because, I'm going to give a big excuse now for my poor learning of other languages. It's really just an excuse, but it is something that does happen. So as a native English speaker, I go to another country, for example, and people actually are far more interested really in speaking English to me, practicing their English with me, than they are tolerating my poor excuse for their own language, So I live in France, but it's honestly, this is just an excuse because there are plenty of English people who come to France and learn the language fine. But my excuse is that I walk into any room and people instantly switch to English when I speak to them in French,
But I thought in France that's not the problem because not all of French people love to speak English.
Oh, well, this is a bit of a myth, actually. Yeah, the stereotype is that you come to Paris, for example, and people refuse to speak English to you.
Yeah.
Not really the case. The truth is this. Okay, that happens, right? That happens if you are, let's say, an American tourist or something, and you go in and you just speak English to people and expect them to reply to you instantly. Of course, people aren't going to do that, really, because that's a bit rude, isn't it? But the truth is that you go in, you speak French to people, and then you hit the limit of your French, and then they are quite willing to speak English to you. And in fact, more and more I find people are prepared, in fact, happy and motivated to speak English to you. So, yeah, they only will refuse to speak English if you refuse to speak any French whatsoever. But if you can at least say bonjour or bonsoir or something, then they will switch to English quite happily. So they're not quite as rude and unhelpful as people think. They're still rude and unhelpful, don't get me wrong, but not quite as much as people say.
Good to know, actually. And speaking of the switching to English, this situation when you come prepared to the coffee shop to answer all the questions about milk, sugar, to go or in place and all that stuff. And then one other question comes in play, and then you have absolutely no idea to answer that. And you think about yourself that you failed the mission.
Oh God, it's such a common occurrence for me in French that I'm used to it now, where I'll go in, I'll survive for a little bit, and then someone just says something, and I've got no idea what they've said. And basically, my way of dealing with it is probably not very good. I don't necessarily recommend this to everyone, because I just stand there and go, or I maybe try and repeat what they said to me, or just stand there until they solve the problem for me. Normally that's when they switch to English, I suppose.
Or you instantly start looking like...
Yeah, just look lost. It's not the end of the world. I'm not a very good example, probably, for people out there learning English. I have all these tales of failure and embarrassment in French, but I think it's all part of the process, actually. You can't avoid it. You really can't avoid it. If you're going to try and learn a language, you have to expect to be embarrassed, to make mistakes, to get things wrong over and over again. And if we're going to talk about myths around language learning, I think one of them is that you can learn the language and then use it, that you can kind of, let's say, learn English and then actually go out into the world and use it fine.
Exactly.
And in fact, that doesn't happen. What happens is you think you've learnt English to a certain level, and then you actually have to use it, and you're suddenly hit with the reality of the situation, which is that you don't have the control that you had, you don't have the fluency that you thought you had. And then you kind of think, oh my God, I haven't learnt English.
Hi, it's Ina from the future here. And this is exactly how I felt during this interview. And these words help me a lot. A lot. So please don't forget that. Your English skills and your communication skills and the amount of time you spend communicating with people are really different things. And you can improve either one or other or both at the same time. And that's cool.
But there's no such thing as learning English, if you know what I mean, in the sense that you never actually finish. You never actually go, right, well, that's it. I've learned English. Better start using it now. That never happens. Instead, it's just a long process where you have to keep practicing it. So it's a bit like physical fitness. You have to keep doing it in order to stay fit, just to keep a basic level of fitness going. And then you also have to try to always make these incremental improvements. But there's no end point, I think. I think it's a constant journey and a constant process of just slowly trying to maintain and improve. But the idea that there is such a thing as mastery of English or just an end point in this process is the wrong way of thinking about it, probably.
And is it true for natives as well, that you have no end point in mastering your language?
Well, yeah, absolutely. There are plenty of native English speakers who feel that they are really bad at English, and also plenty of native speakers who don't realise that they're really bad at English. Like, native speaker is not a language level, you know? That's another...
it's good to remember, yeah.
Yeah, that's a misconception, that people just equate native speaker with mastery of the language, but it's not the case. There are plenty of native speakers who are terrible at communicating, just really bad at writing emails, where the email is not clear, it's not clear what the point is, or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's not, let's say, it's less often directly considered, because obviously learners of English, they pay specific attention to their level of English, and it's very, very out in the open. But for native speakers, they don't always think about it that openly, about their use of English and their communication skills. But it's certainly something that everyone can work on. It's not just about knowing lots of words and knowing the grammar and things like that. There's a lot of other things involved in the way you manage, the way you communicate and interact with other people. So I think even native speakers have to work on their level of English too.
And we'll also touch that in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And here's another question. Is there any difference between the way you were taught English as your first language at school and the way you now teach it to students as a foreign language?
Yes, lots of differences. First of all, I don't really think I was taught English. And this might shock you, but we didn't really do a lot of what you might consider like traditional learning of English. So we didn't really do a lot of grammar. I never passed a sentence, if you know what I mean, like pass in the sense of P-A-R-S-E, like breaking down a sentence into its constituent parts, understanding the structure of English. I never did that. There must have been some sort of reform in the school curriculum before I went to school where they decided to stop teaching in that way.
Wow.
So when I was at school, English was divided into English literature and English language, okay? So the English literature stuff was all about mainly reading some books and then writing essays and analysing the themes and so on, right? Mm-hmm. And then there was English language, and that's where you'd imagine we would be doing all of the grammar, you know?
Yeah.
But I actually, when I left school and eventually started training to be a teacher, I remember the very first thing that I ever had to do was a questionnaire. And one of the first questions was, you know, what's an adjective, what's a noun, what's a verb? And I wasn't actually able to answer the question, shockingly enough.
Oh, wow.
Because I wasn't taught that. I was never actually taught those things. I think it's unbelievable. And I kind of think, well, that's just general knowledge that everyone should know. But in my English language classes at school, we did certain things like, for example, how to write a business letter. Okay, so the structure of a business letter, where the address should go, where the date goes, what the standard format of a business letter, and other types of writing, structural, organizational features of certain texts. But no, we never actually broke down grammar. We didn't really do work on things like conditionals or tenses or anything like that, actually. And I think the idea is that, you know, you just sort of learn your native language just by using it, reading it and stuff. And you don't actually have to have it directly taught to you. Whereas like my dad's generation, when he was at school, they learned English and they also learned Latin as well.
Wow.
The reason for learning Latin is that, you know, the idea was that if you understand Latin, then you can understand so many other languages.
Pretty much everything, I guess.
Yeah, you can. It's a sort of a format, a template for understanding other languages, which probably tells you something about the way we thought people learnt languages in those days as well, which is if you learn the structure, the grammar, the templates of the language, then you will then be able to master it and use it. But really learning a language is it's not just that bottom-up approach. There are other factors involved too. Anyway, my long rambling answer is that no, I wasn't really taught English in the way that I teach English to people. But the way I teach English to people is a combination of what we call bottom up and top down. So bottom up means, let's say, learning the language or teaching it by looking at its structure and the way it's built, right? It's the constituent parts, the grammar of it.
All these things considered boring.
Yes, probably, unless you are a geek who loves that stuff.
Yes.
Right?
That's my case.
That's your case. And, plenty of people. So it's about the grammar, the phonology of it, the way it's constructed. And then the top-down approach is looking at meaning, approaching language from its functional side. If you're studying English with a written text, the top-down approach would be to focus on what is the text saying, the bigger questions about what the thing really means, how the writer feels, how the reader is supposed to feel. Those are all sort of top-down considerations. And really, learning a language is probably a combination of approaching it from those two angles. And, there are theories that say that if you focus on meaning, if you consume lots of English written and audio, and you focus on the message and really what is being communicated, that language learning happens as a side effect of that. And that actually studying the constituent parts, the bits, the grammar and stuff, that's not necessarily the natural way to learn. I don't know, actually. I'm still unsure of what is right. I think it's probably a combination of the two, that really learning English is about consuming a lot of it and focusing on the meaning of it and just, listening to a long podcast and trying to understand all of it, reading a book and just trying to understand the story, and a combination of the more considered approach of studying the grammar, looking at the way the language actually is built, and, manipulating those structures, looking at the phonology, looking at the different sounds, how they're made, and building the language from the bottom as well. So it's probably a combination of the two. What do you think? I mean, you have learned English as a second language. What, in your experience, has been the most useful thing to do? Has it been just sort of listening to podcasts and stuff, or has it been studying grammar and things like that?
I guess you're pretty right about the combination, because you can't just stick to one method, only reading and reading and reading and reading, and then voila, you're like speaking English like a pro. No, that's not the case actually. Not with English or any other language. For me, it's with German. What I think is the most probably important part is manipulating, as you've said. So unless you start to try to use the language, like to speak, to make constructions, even in your head, not in conversation, you cannot understand the language completely. So you just need to try to speak, even if you are on the most basic level. You need to try to speak to someone. Your phrases are going to be like really easy. Probably there'll be a lot of mistakes and stuff, but still you need to practice. It's not a pleasant thought that you need to practice, because it scares you like really a lot, but it's really important. Language is the thing for communication between people. So if you're not communicating, you won't be able to communicate as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, I try and find different analogies for it. One of them I come up with is like learning to play tennis. You don't really learn to play tennis by studying the rules of physics.
But they can help you.
Yeah, for sure. Like understanding that spin works like this, understanding that you can make the ball do this by moving the racket in this way. But you've got to practice just hitting the ball over the net again and again and again and again and again with an opponent, with another person in front of you. You've got to practice trying to beat them in the game, and then you just sort of learn your fluency in terms of tennis. It's similar in English. Yeah, you've got to be doing it and try and make the conditions as similar to real conditions as possible. So if you're learning to play tennis, practicing hitting a ball against a wall again and again, which is sort of like, I guess, doing controlled grammar exercises on paper. Sort of, it's not really the same as doing it for real.
Yeah.
Actually, playing against another person is obviously going to be far more effective. And added to that, making it competitive, playing in real games where you're really trying to win, you're pushing yourself to your limit. That's obviously going to be far more beneficial to you. Similarly, in English, actually having conversations, actually doing things in English is going to be good. You've got to actually be in it to win it. You've got to be doing it as well, I guess.
Yeah, and that's also helps you to cope with wins and losses as well. So if you lose, your life continues. That's not the end of the world. And the same thing is when you win. It's not like you get the highest point of the language, but you need to win again and again and again. So you need to practice again.
Yeah, right. It's like being a boxer. I talk about this thing quite a lot, but I have met quite a lot of students who I think have this mindset of studying and studying and studying, but not wanting to use the language because they're afraid that they're not ready because they're going to make mistakes.
Yes.
It's a bit like training to be a boxer. You're trying to become the heavyweight champion, and you just train from nothing all the way to one fight. Without having a real fight on the way. You're in the gym all the way up until you fight against Mike Tyson, which obviously is ridiculous. You have to be fighting people all the time in real fights and competitions to work your way up to that level.
Let's finish with the sports part of our podcast.
Okay.
Just kidding. Let's now imagine we're Mythbusters.
Yes.
So jump into your imaginary lab coats, put on your imaginary safety glasses, and let's bust some myth about learning English. I've got 5 of them for you. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Perfect. So the first one, we already touched that, but probably you could elaborate on this a bit. A native speaker is a key. So, it's widely believed that it's better to learn English with a native speaker than with someone who, for example, speaks your language or any other. And often even proficiency or teaching certificates or teaching skills are not considered as an advantage compared to being a native speaker. Do you believe nativeness is really the key here?
No, I don't. And if you think about it, the idea that teaching skills, teaching qualifications are less important than simply being a native speaker, that kind of quite the insult to the entire English teaching industry and the whole idea that one can learn to be a great teacher. If people think that still is less important than just being a native speaker of the language, then why bother even going to university to train to be a teacher? Why bother taking any courses? It is to dismiss the whole idea of teaching skills and teaching methods, isn't it? So, no, I don't believe that's true. I think there is a skill set to being a good teacher. You can also find native speakers who will actually potentially be bad for your English if they are not teaching you in the right way, if they're doing too much talking, if they are not supporting you in the right ways. Sure, they will sort of have that natural inbuilt fluency and all that stuff and probably be correct, although native speakers make errors in their English too. Sure, there's that, but they might not know what they're doing. Whereas someone who has learnt English themselves as a second language and now has worked their way up to the level of being a teacher, where their English is very proficient, it's so good, but also they've got these teaching skills, they can be immensely useful because someone like that has already done what the other person is trying to do, and they can say, look, here's how you do it. Look, I've done it and I know the route. They kind of managed to take this route to this end point themselves, whereas a native speaker did this. They were basically blindfolded, driven up there in the back of a car, and then the door was opened, the blindfold was taken off, here you are, you're at the top. So they don't know how they got there, whereas the non-native speaker does know how they got there, and they could probably help the other person do it too. But I understand why people assume that having a native speaker as your teacher is better, because what people think is that, well, a native speaker is going to provide the right model of that language, and that is the only important thing. But I think it's to misunderstand a lot of things about it. Maybe there's some truth in it, maybe there is some truth in that, because you do imagine a teacher teaching a group of students and they're maybe teaching them certain fossilized errors. There might be some bits of pronunciation which are not the same as the way a native speaker would put it, or maybe little grammatical errors and things. But in the grand scheme of everything you need to be good at English, those things are really kind of minor details. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to be completely perfect to be able to be proficient at English. Even someone who is C2 level is still going to make mistakes like that. You can get to a C2 level without TH sounds. You can get to a C2 level with the occasional grammatical error or influence from your first language, or maybe just not using exactly the right word here or there, or maybe your level of fluency being slightly lower than someone else. You can still make it because it's a very kind of holistic thing that you've got to be able to do so many things. So I don't really agree. But then again, I don't think there is such a thing as necessarily a perfect teacher, someone who's kind of completely perfect. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, and probably a learner of English should try and broaden the number of people that they work with and find a variety of different teachers. I worked in a school in London that was a really good experience for me, and we had a teacher from Poland, a Turkish teacher, and other people from different places, a Brazilian girl who taught me so much about English teaching and about language teaching. And, I was working alongside them, and I loved working with them because I could just fire questions at them and they would kind of like put my doubts at rest. I would say, what do you think? How did you do this? And stuff like that. And so I think it's very, very valuable to work with non-native speakers who've reached a certain level of English. I think it's really important. And it's to misunderstand the process of learning a language to basically say, no, it's native speakers only. It's also potentially kind of racist as well.
Didn't think about it that way.
It's on the spectrum of prejudice.
Yeah.
Some people think of it like that, especially when it comes to jobs, like jobs being given to native speakers, instead of non-natives who have really good qualifications. That's a kind of, that's unfair, really.
Yeah. I also suppose the main thing for the teacher is to be able to explain things. And this is not the built-in feature in people. It should be somehow developed, through your probably learning how to teach, actually.
Yeah, a teacher is not just there to be a model of the language. The teacher is there sometimes to just get out of the way, to facilitate the learner and to activate the English in the learner, to help.
Let's go to the next myth then.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds either like AI is completely useless and even potentially harmful for learning languages, or I can learn English with AI technologies only. No teachers, no courses, only AI chat and me, and we'll succeed. By AI, I mean, of course, artificial intelligence, all these ChatGPTs, Geminis, and other technical helpers. Do you think either of these statements is true?
I don't think it's true that it's completely unhelpful. I mean, maybe in the earlier days you could say that because it was pretty unreliable and it would make mistakes and things like that. But there's no denying how amazing and how useful it is. I would dismiss that idea that it's unhelpful. I think it's definitely helpful. Can you learn a language only with AI? Maybe. If you're really smart about it and you are motivated and you keep going and you keep doing it, yeah, you can probably get yourself up to a pretty good level with it now. Whether I think that's good or not, I don't know. I don't think so because, obviously I hope that people continue to use humans. I think as we go further and further into the future, even in just a couple of years, AI will be so unbelievably advanced that it'll be normal probably to learn English with it, I'm afraid to say. And, in 5 years, in 10 years, the world might be completely different. So now, right now, if you just press the pause button on things now, I think a very smart learner who's very motivated and is able to use AI in the cleverest ways could probably make a good deal of progress with it.
But you should know these ways.
Yeah, you've got to be a very proficient user of AI to make it do the things you want it to do. But the thing is, though, things like ChatGPT is a bit annoying. It's got very great potential, but then in actual practice, it can be quite irritating. For example, you want it to give you feedback on your English. You want it to correct all your errors, but it's just far too positive and upbeat about everything. So it's just like, yeah, that was great. That's brilliant. Perfect.
But it's supportive.
This is good.
It motivates you.
Yeah, no, this is important. This is really important. But sometimes you think, okay, I'm already motivated. What I need to do is fix these errors that I know I'm making. So can you just tell me what they are and then I will destroy them? And AI is like, no, you're great. It's a bit like some English teachers. Some English teachers are like that.
But it highlights your errors anyway.
It does it? Because I've tried to ask it to give me feedback on my English.
Wow.
Maybe it's just because my English is fine. But I've asked for it
Probably
to
it won't be like a really hard task for that.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm asking for is something beyond just like grammatical errors and something into more like discourse management, which I hasn't quite got the hang of yet. But it will. It will be able to do that. So it's a really difficult question to answer. I think maybe not yet. I don't think it's really possible yet to reach a really good level of English only with AI. In a way, the question is a little bit unfair. I think most people are going to do a combination of working with AI and working with people, right? I think that's much more realistic. And in that case, I think that AI is going to only be helpful to learners. I don't know about for teachers. I think it could completely take away our jobs and our livelihoods, potentially.
Honestly, I faced the AI-only cases where people like want to learn English with chat only, and they say that they don't need any teacher because they have a teacher in their pocket. And are you afraid of AI can take away your job?
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid of AI for all sorts of reasons. And that's just like the first, most obvious one, that it's going to take away my job.
Really?
I mean, I don't know. I talk about this quite a lot these days, actually. And whenever I talk about it on my podcast, people always comment and they say, no, we won't stop listening to you, Luke, because we want to choose you. We want to listen to Luke, the human Luke, rather than AI. And I think, well, that's very nice. But tell me how you feel in 3 years. You might think differently in 3 years when you see how great it is.
But, you know, the handcrafted things are always more valuable than the, factory ones. So probably this won't be the case.
Yeah, maybe that's the case. Maybe that's another way of thinking about it, that actually maybe what it will do is it will raise the value of human teachers, but it has to be the ones who are able to compete with AI. I don't know. I think it depends on results that people get and the experiences that people have and the new generations that are going to come up in the next 10, 20 years. We might get a generation who actually prefer doing these things with AI, and the idea of talking to a human that you don't know would be horrible to them. We might have a generation of people who are completely socially awkward, even more than the generations we have now, who are raised on the internet and are quite socially awkward.
Yeah.
It might be people's comfort zone to have their AI, their universal super brain AI that helps them with everything.
Yeah, we'll see.
So
yeah.
I don't know. I'm a little bit pessimistic about it, I'm afraid.
I'd say technically optimistic, rather.
You mean I'm technically optimistic? I'm optimistic about how good the technology will be.
Yeah,
that's true, but maybe socially pessimistic in the sense that I think AI is going to, first of all, probably take away a lot of people's jobs. Although that might be good because, I guess that will let us do more of the things we just enjoy doing, I suppose, as long as we've got money to do it. But then there are quite a lot of very, very well-informed predictions about AI that are quite frightening, I'm afraid.
But thanks for sharing anyway.
Yeah, you're welcome. Have a nice day.
On this positive note, let's switch to the next myth and the next approach in learning languages.
Yes.
Duolingo is the thing. Have you ever used it or ever had this green owl in your nightmares?
Yeah, the green owl. My God.
Because I did, but with German. German can make almost everything a bit more scary.
Yeah.
But this green owl with German is total
terrifying. He's in your inbox all the time. You wake up in the morning, have I got any emails? And there's the green owl.
And it's suffering.
I'm worried about you.
Yeah, it's suffering because you didn't touch that for like 2 days. Yeah. And it's completely lost.
This green owl is guilt tripping you, first thing in the morning. It knows when you're asleep. It knows where you are. It knows when you're probably waking up. It drops an email into your inbox. So it's the first thing you see in the morning. And the subject line of the email is, I'm worried about you, or I'm worried about your English. And you feel that sense of guilt and you're like, oh God, it's passively, aggressively manipulating you, guilt tripping you into learning English. I mean, okay, the thing about Duolingo, I've used it. I understand the way it works, that it helps you build structures. The idea being that, if you learn these structures, you'll be able to use the language because you've changed the subject of this sentence over and over again and conjugated the verb here and you know where to put the adjective and da-da-da. But really what Duolingo is doing is it's kind of gamifying the language learning process. Yeah, well, it just wants you to stay on its platform, keep using it. It's just like any other social media platform. It just wants you to stay on it and use it all the time because they're making money out of you for doing that. Okay. Does it actually work as a language learning platform? I think that with language learning, anything is better than nothing. So if it's doing Duolingo versus not doing anything, then of course doing Duolingo is going to be better. But I think that there are probably plenty of other things that you can do that are better than that. And we've talked about some of those things, having one-to-one lessons with a teacher. I think probably signing up for one-to-one lessons with italki is probably a better idea. I don't know how much time on Duolingo you can get per dollar or whatever. You're obviously going to get less time on italki, but I think it's probably better to have actual lessons with a human person where you're actually talking and getting feedback and things like that. I think that's probably better than the system that Duolingo uses. It's just basically old-fashioned grammar studying, isn't it, really, taken out of context.
But still, it does not explain things along the way, so you just tap, 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 and that's it. It corrects your mistakes, but it does not explain them, what should be the correct answer and why. So that's where the human teaching comes in play, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, I get it. The idea is that, humans like to play games where they rack up points and they get rewarded with little stars and things. And so the idea is that there's your motivation, is like getting the little stars. And the consequence of getting them is that you acquire another language. Okay.
Well, that's a good thing, yeah.
I don't know. It's a lot of people think it's bollocks, Sorry, I said a rude word. In British English anyway, It's fairly harmless around the world, that word.
Yeah, exactly,
in the UK, It's like, he said a rude word. In the rest of the world, they're like, okay, that was a funny word. Don't know what it means.
So if you do not have any time for the lessons with the human teacher, then it's better to do Duolingo than nothing.
Yeah. I mean, sure. It's better to do that than nothing. But try and diversify the way that you learn language as well. So you're not just doing that, but trying to do other things too, like listen to a podcast in that language that you're trying to learn, do some reading in it, and try to actually speak to people as well.
Good advice. And the fourth myth we're going to discuss today, you can learn English through songs, movies, series, and etc. In other words, media content. For example, I've heard that Scandinavian countries have a really high level of English in average, mostly because they don't dub movies. They just use subtitles and keep the original English audio. Do you think these things are somehow connected? Like the average English level in the country and the way they treat their media content?
I think it's certainly a part of the puzzle, and it's got to be an important thing that in Sweden, Denmark, Norway, they just show a lot of English TV, not dubbed. And the Scandinavians have got like some of the highest levels of English in the world. It can't be a total coincidence. I think there are probably other factors involved as well. Probably the way that they teach, the way that they think about the language, and maybe there are some similarities between those languages and English, where maybe if you're coming from that language background, that it's somehow a little easier. You're given a slight advantage because the language is kind of similar. Like I was in Norway this summer for our holiday, and we were driving in the car and decided to try and learn a bit of Norwegian, and we were listening to these songs with the months of the year, like the days of the week, the numbers, the letters, the months of the year. And like most of the months of the year were just exactly the same as in English. It's like, okay, what's the next one? September. Oh, okay, so it's September, and October, November, December. All right, they're all just the same. Like a lot of similarities. So they're probably quite close. That's something to do with it. Culturally as well, I think, like culture of English-speaking countries is not that different to cultures in Scandinavian countries. And it probably, makes a difference. All these different things all contribute, the way they teach, the way they think about it, the similarity of their language to it, and also the fact that, yes, they are exposed to English in their homes every evening on television. Sure, it's going to be a big thing. But can you learn English through series and media content and stuff like that? Probably not exclusively. Again, it just shows that you don't learn English just through one single method, that you kind of diversify. So you're not going to just learn English only by watching Netflix, although people do say that. Oh, you want to learn English? Oh, just watch Netflix with the subtitles on. I think it helps. It definitely helps, but it's not the only thing. One thing I would say about series and movies is actually for listening practice, I think that they are not the thing I recommend first and foremost.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it depends, if that's really what you're interested in, then go for it. But actually, series on Netflix and stuff, they're often very difficult to hear. It's often really hard to actually hear what the people are saying. And it's the same in movies. That, like, a lot of the time, you're like, what? I can't hear it. I can't actually hear what they're saying. And this is something that native speakers experience these days too. An alarming number of native speakers watch their shows with the subtitles on. It's now really common to watch shows with the subtitles. And it's to do with the way in which movies and shows are recorded these days, the way the audio is recorded. It's recorded with these super sensitive microphones where the actors only really need to mumble things under their breath and it's picked up. But that does make it everything a bit breathy and a bit mumbled. So it's not clearly signalled like it was in the old days. In the old days, people used to speak like this on television.
Exactly.
And these days, people, everyone's kind of mumbling and... So it's actually quite a frustrating experience watching TV shows sometimes. And so, of course, naturally, I recommend listening to podcasts where it's just the voice recorded in a really quiet room with a fairly decent microphone. That's a great way of just isolating the English and the voice. And so that's good. But again, a lot of it's about motivation, and some people just love watching TV shows, like my wife. So, it depends on what you really want to do. No one should feel forced to listen to podcasts if that's not your cup of tea. I mean, we're on a podcast now, so we're probably talking to podcast people.
Yeah, so...
But a lot of people, like my brother, for example, just never ever listens to podcasts. It just doesn't really work for him. Everyone's got to find their own way of doing it. And if playing computer games, watching series and movies in English is the thing that you love to do, then sure, go ahead and do it in English with English subtitles or without English subtitles. Mix it up a bit.
It's a good advice, actually.
I hope so.
The most interesting part was about the computer games.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, definitely. So first of all, you can switch your computer games to English and you can play Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption or whatever in English. But still, computer games are very immersive and they take a long time. And so that's a long time spent operating in English. But also online, a lot of people play games online. And that often means chatting away to the people you're playing against. And if you do that in English, then that's a really good idea. And I've met a lot of learners of English who have good fluency. And I say to them, what is it that you're doing? And they say, I play games in English. I think that's a really good idea. That can be brilliant.
Yeah, that's cool.
Depending on the level of conversation that's going on. But some games involve a lot of teamwork and collaboration and stuff. So brilliant. In fact, that's a way to access English practice that most other people never get or don't know how to get. So it can be a really good idea.
The last but definitely not least myth. You cannot consider yourself advanced in English if you speak with a foreign accent. I mean, it can be very difficult to understand people speaking with a strong accent like my Russian accent right now. So our listeners, and look if you're desperately crying inside right now. But it's been done for illustration purposes only. And now I'm back to the more pleasant version of my voice, I hope. But still, for some learners, it feels extremely important to get rid of their accents. I have plenty questions about accents, but the main one is probably, does it really annoy natives? Should learners set a goal to get rid of their accents as soon as possible?
So it's a really good question. I should just say that one thing, when you spoke there with that strong Russian accent, actually I understood every single word you said.
Wow.
So it's maybe not intelligibility that's the issue, right? And, someone like, I don't know, who's a famous person who speaks with a strong accent? Someone like Borat, let's say,
yeah.
Who's he's obviously got this really strong foreign accent, but we understand every single thing he says.
Thank you. Thank you to let me in your house. Thank you to let me in your ears.
But accents, it's always a question of intelligibility, so how easy you are to be understood, and identity, meaning what associations we make and how we feel about you as a person based on the way you speak. And accent is a hugely important signifier of identity. I think it might in fact be the most important one. My friend Paul often says that the accent is who you are. you can't really hide it. The accent tells the story of who you are. I've got a friend who was born in England, but when she was about 4, her family moved to Florida. Her parents or her parents' parents were from India. So she's this interesting combination. But for me, she's American because she speaks with an American accent. And, so she was a kid in America. She went to school in America. She watched American TV. A lot of her reference points are American. She's American, even though she's got a British passport and her grandparents were born in India. So does it annoy natives? I mean, I don't know. I can't say for everyone, but I think probably a very strong accent is going to be obvious. Let's say that. I don't know if it's always going to be annoying, but it's going to be an obvious thing that's always going to be the first thing that people notice if it's a very strong accent, and that's all that people will hear is the accent. They won't hear actually the things you're trying to say, that'll just become a barrier or something that blocks you. So for that reason, yeah, it's probably a good idea to try to smooth out, an accent if it's very strong, because it becomes distracting. Let's say it's distracting. It distracts away from all the other things that you're trying to do. Whether that distraction is annoying or entertaining or something, I don't know. But it's probably a bit of a problem. Yes, I think it's probably worth trying to speak in a way where your accent is not the first and only thing that people think of when you're talking, so that it's not a distraction. But then you don't need to eradicate it entirely. For example, you don't need to speak like someone from England. You don't need to speak as if you were born in the southeast of England. I don't think you really need to. I mean, why? Why would you need to? For example, how do you feel about your accent? Because, I can hear that you weren't born and bred in England.
No, of course. I was born in Russia. But the thing is, I really love the British accent. So probably it's some unconscious thing going on. So I just swap it in by listening something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's probably more British than Russian, but not completely British. And I know that I won't be able to erase my Russian background completely from a speech. It will probably step into when I'm tired or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have a goal to get rid of my accent. It somehow just happened.
Yeah.
More or less, I guess.
Yeah. So I think some people feel like they need to remove every trace of their original accent. And the point is, I suppose, that I don't think it's really necessary.
I'm afraid it's not possible.
Yeah. And also it's not really realistic. I think it's very, very, very hard to completely lose any trace of your accent. So that's probably unrealistic. But it's still, I think, a good idea to be clear. I think that's the main thing. To be clear and to speak in a way where the accent is not a distraction.
Yeah.
I think that's really the most important. If there are still traces of who you are and where you're from, this is fine. In fact, this is good. This is great. And even there's an argument to say that you should definitely keep traces of your accent because it actually is very charming and it can be very sexy, Like, it's true. People say this about, for example, a French accent, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, this is one of those things that actually, like, I've got some friends who are French, who are comedians, and they have a bit of a French accent, and they say, I could try and fix my accent, but actually I have a lot more success with the girls when I speak like this.
Oh my.
So it's a bit of a joke.
Yeah.
But maybe it's true. It can be actually very charming and it gives you something interesting and it gives you some character and it can actually be positive.
It can lead the conversation further because you can always ask.
Yeah, if you don't mind. I mean, if you move to England, and you're not English and you speak with a bit of an accent, then I'm afraid you're going to have to deal with people saying, "Oh, where are you from?" People are going to do that. But if you can accept that that's going to happen, then that can actually be very interesting and it can be charming and it makes you original. So it's fine to have a bit of an accent, but it shouldn't be a distraction.
That's it. That's all myth for today.
Yay, we busted a few myths. It's always fun.
Yeah. Let's then wrap up the part about learning and teaching and dive deeper into the details of your career journey.
Sure.
I'm always curious about how people end up choosing their job and what they feel they're meant to do for a living. So the first question here is, if being a teacher was your childhood dream or not?
No, it wasn't. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was a kid. Although, okay, so I was really into sport when I was younger. I was just mad about different sports. I loved doing sport. And I was a goalkeeper
Oh, so you've dreamed about becoming the famous footballer.
I wanted to be a goalkeeper, yeah. But I never really thought it was a realistic prospect. I never really thought that I would end up being a professional footballer, but I loved doing it. But then when I was sort of about 15, 16, which is the age when you leave school in England, and then you probably go on to do other qualifications afterwards, you go into higher education, further education. But you have a meeting with a careers advisor, and the careers advisor asks you what you would like to do, you know, and I had no idea, but I just thought to myself, well, I like sport, and the thing I love the most is like all the sports equipment. You know, like in sports class at school, when you're going to do something, I don't know, like we're going to play badminton, or we're going to play football, or we're going to play basketball, or trampolining and stuff. And there's that bit where the teacher brings out the equipment and you're all sitting on the floor and there's like a big bag full of footballs or a bunch of trampolines or something. And I was always like, oh, I can't wait to start using the equipment. And I used to dream about having access to a sports centre and to be able to use all the equipment to play football in a little five-a-side football pitch or something like that. It was just my dream. So the idea of having access to all this equipment and stuff was just so appealing. So I kind of had this vague idea that I'd be the manager of a sports centre. And that's what I said in my careers meeting. But no, I never thought I'd end up being a teacher. And my career journey, I don't know really. I mean, I struggled when I left university. I had no idea what I wanted to do.
And what was your degree?
So my degree, I did one of those fairly sort of useless but interesting degrees. It was media and cultural studies.
So it's not teaching again?
No. I had no idea or intention that I would be a teacher. So I left school with sort of average marks, average grades, did A-levels, which in England is the next thing you do from sort of normally the age of about 16 to 18 or 19. And your A-levels are what you need to get to university. So my A-levels, I failed them really badly because at that time, so I left school, and at school you have to wear a uniform and stuff, and it's, you know, quite rigid, quite strict and stuff. And then when you go to college to do A-levels, everything's different. So I was with different people, hardly anyone from my old school, because I went to college in a different town, and you didn't have to wear a uniform, and it was a lot more relaxed. So for example, they didn't have a bell that told you when you had to be in or out of class. Classes just started when they were supposed to start. And it was a bit relaxed. It was kind of like, well, you don't have to attend every class as long as you keep up with the work. And I heard you don't have to attend every class. And then I was sort of hanging around with...
The common mistake, yeah.
Yeah. And I made friends with people whose priority, like mine, wasn't to go to class. And I was suddenly I wasn't interested in sport. I wasn't healthy anymore. I was interested in playing music in bands and that sort of thing. So I got into a band, and I spent a lot of the time hanging around in the park next to the college rather than actually in the college in my classes. And I didn't do a lot of work. I had a fantastic time. 2 of the best years of my life, really. Then I failed my A-levels quite spectacularly. And then I had to... A lot of my friends went off to university. I stayed behind, and I went to another college, and I took more A-levels, and I actually passed those ones. But my results were not brilliant. So in terms of options that I had for university degrees, my options became a bit limited. Plus, I still didn't really know what I was interested in. I still didn't really have an idea of what it was I wanted to do. I had a vague idea I was interested in sociology and psychology rather than languages.
It still sounds like work with people.
Yeah. It's kind of in the same ballpark, isn't it? Kind of culture and communication. So anyway, my options for university were a bit limited, but I was looking at sociology and I was looking at media and cultural studies, and I ended up doing a dual degree, half sociology, half media and cultural studies. That's a lot of stuff, because media and cultural studies is already 2 things. So I spent, basically 3 years studying media and cultural studies, which essentially means studying culture. So that includes things like psychology, understanding the way in which society works, and describing that through the medium of film and stuff like that. So I did a lot of film studies, It was really interesting.
It may be quite useless, but really interesting.
Yes,
Yeah.
one of those degrees. Useless, but really interesting. And I came out of university and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I didn't really feel like I had skills I could apply to anything in particular. And so there were a couple of lost years, really. I was still playing music. I'd played music at university in a band. I played music in another band when I left university. But for 2 years, I was kind of lost and drifting and still living at my parents' house again. And it was really bad. I had this vague idea I'd go and work in media in some way, which is what my dad had done. He'd worked for the BBC for many years. So I sort of had this vague idea that I would do a similar thing. And he helped me. He got me some work experience placements at different production companies. And I even worked at the BBC for a couple of weeks.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, it was a great opportunity. Although basically I was just a guy running around making tea for people,
Oh.
You just get to spend time in the
So not really journalistic stuff.
Oh, no, not really. No. It's very sort of junior level stuff. The tea boy or a runner, someone who does just sort of like basic work that no one else wants to do. But it wasn't really for me. I didn't really feel like it was for me. I just didn't feel comfortable in that world. I also felt like I was just kind of like in my dad's shadow. I didn't really want to be what we call now like a nepo baby. Have you ever heard of that expression?
No.
Nepo meaning nepotism.
Mm.
So a nepo baby is someone who's got where they are through nepotism.
Got that.
So I wasn't really interested in doing that. It made me feel bad. So I needed work. I needed to find some skills that I could apply to a job and a career, but also was quite miserable and needed to have some kind of life experience of my own. So in a moment of desperation, I signed up for a CELTA course.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which makes it sound much more dramatic than it actually was. So I decided to do a teacher training course. CELTA means, if your listeners don't know, is the Certificate in English Language Teaching to Adults. And it's the first major qualification that you take if you want to become a TEFL teacher. TEFL, that's teaching English as a foreign language. So yeah, I decided to do that because it would allow me to travel and it would also give me skills that I could use for a job.
That's actually an unexpected answer.
Really? Because you thought that I was born to be
No.
the English teacher. It was the thing I'd always dreamed of doing.
Actually, yes. Because just the way you do that, it's like makes the impression of that is your passion actually for the whole life. Mm-hmm. But I'm about the part that teaching allows you to travel around the world. Does it?
Oh, yes. So you asked me earlier about how I feel about being born a native speaker, and I said I was privileged and lucky because having English as my first language has allowed me to do a lot of things. So when you've got a teaching qualification, you realise there are lots of jobs all around the world. I could go to anywhere, really, anywhere where people want to learn English, and I can go and there are jobs waiting for me there. And that's a thing that a lot of people do. A lot of people from England do that.
If I'm not mistaken, you have experience teaching English as a foreign language in 3 countries. In England, at the very beginning, I suppose. Then France now. And in the middle, like Japan?
Yeah.
It's absolutely not an obvious choice. Like, how did you end up there?
Japan really was my first proper job teaching English. In England, I taught when I was training, I did my teaching practice. But then once I'd got my qualification, it was like, right, where shall I go? Now I've got the qualification. Now I'm going to go somewhere. That was the idea. I'm going to get out of this situation and go off somewhere and have an experience and go and travel.
So you decided to go a completely different direction.
Yeah, I did. Initially, I was looking at Europe. I was thinking I'll go to Barcelona because in Barcelona I can teach in the morning and then go to the beach in the afternoon.
For the siesta.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. Then for some reason I was like, no, I'll go to Poland. I'll go and teach English in Poland. No idea why I thought that. And then I remember specifically, I went for a drink with a friend of mine and I was talking to him and saying, I was thinking of going here, thinking of going there. And I said, there are lots of jobs in Japan. And he said, just go to Japan. And then I was like, yeah, all right. Yeah, I'll just go to Japan. Yeah. Why not? Why not just go to Japan? If I'm going to go somewhere, I might as well go somewhere really far. And so I really got into the idea of like, yeah, I'm going to go to Japan because I liked Japanese stuff as far as I knew. I liked certain Japanese computer games and manga movies and things. I thought, yeah, that looks like a really interesting, different place. Let's go all the way to Japan. Why not?
Sounds like a huge adventure, by the way.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And it did turn out to be a huge adventure. It was my first experience properly working as a teacher in a full-time teaching position. But then obviously I spent 2 years living away from my home country in a completely different place, which was an incredible experience that I'm really glad I had. I learned a lot about myself and became much more confident than I had been. I had 2 miserable years after university, completely in the wilderness, but then being sent out to the middle of Japan for 2 years and having a great time. But I worked really, really hard. So it taught me a lot of things about English teaching and also just helped me kind of get out of the kind of funk that I was in my life at the time too.
And can you recall how your first lesson went?
Not so bad. Not bad, really. I think my very first lesson, I was with this really old woman. She was like maybe 90-something.
What? Sorry?
Yeah.
That's insane.
So I got a job with this company in Japan and I didn't know where I would be sent. I ended up in this lovely part of Kanagawa Prefecture. Is that right? God, it's been a long time. Anyway, I ended up in this lovely little town on the coast, about an hour away from Tokyo, to the south of Tokyo, just near the beach. So I would teach there, 5 days a week, long shifts. A lot of the students that we would get there midweek, so for example on a Wednesday morning, a lot of them were just like retired people from the town or like old women. At the weekend, you get all these company workers who weren't at work, so they would come in. But then during the day, it's like housewives and stuff who want to improve their English. So I would end up spending all my time sitting in these little rooms, and the classes were 1, 2, 3 or 4 people at a time. And my first lesson, I'm pretty sure, was with this really old lady who was very low level, but she was just lovely, just really, really nice. And we sat there and I tried to teach her, I don't know, I can't remember what it was now, but we communicated in very basic English. And, my colleagues were like, oh yeah, that's like Mrs. Uchida or something. She's been here for 10 years. She's never got beyond an A2 level, But I learned how to teach English. My first lessons in England when I was training, were really, really difficult and really hard in terms of confidence. But teaching in Japan was pretty good for my confidence because people are quite shy. People are quite nice, they're quite lovely and very kind in my experience. And so it was a lovely, nice atmosphere. People treat you so well over there, they're so pleased to see you because you're not Japanese, you're this English guy. And people are just like, they treat you like a celebrity or something. So that was very good for my confidence. But what I learned was that actually, so I became a teacher because I didn't really know what else to do. But I learned that I was pretty good at it and actually really enjoyed it. And in the 2 years that I spent there, like every day I got better and better at the job. And by the time I left, I felt like I was quite good at it and I felt like I was a good teacher, which was very rewarding. And so I always knew that I could continue doing that. But I came back to England after 2 years and moved to London and continued working. But I still wasn't convinced that I would be an English teacher long term in my life. I was still thinking, what else am I going to do? And there were times when I was thinking, I've got to get out of this and do something else. But I didn't know how to do anything else. And so in the end, I just thought, right, well, I better keep doing this then. And then I kind of threw myself into it more seriously. And I did a Delta, which is the next qualification. But I mean, things about teaching is that English teaching, TEFL as we call it in England, it's probably got a different, I don't know, maybe it's got a different perception in other places in the world. But in England, being a TEFL teacher, people don't value it that much, A lot of people have these ideas about it. Like for a lot of people, if you say you're a TEFL teacher, they kind of go, I did that on holiday once. Or, oh yeah, I did that on my gap year. It's like this kind of not very serious job that anyone can do.
Just because you're a native, actually.
Probably, yeah, it goes back to that again. A lot of people did it when they were on their gap year. So the gap year is that year you take out maybe between studying and starting your career where you go and travel and whatever. And a lot of people do teaching in order to just make some money while they're traveling. So people say that, oh yeah, I did that when I was on my gap year. And even like a friend of mine once said to me, he was having like a difficult time in his job. He was quite stressed. And he said to me, oh, Luke, sometimes I just think I'm going to drop out and become a TEFL teacher.
Oh no.
I was like, oh yeah, really? Mm-hmm. Are you? Okay.
I'll meet you there.
Yeah, well, it just shows that the perception that it has. I mean, people don't even value like school teachers very highly, but TEFL teachers is just like not even thought of as a proper job. So anyway, I was never really sure about it. But then when I decided to go all in, then I've managed to find my way into better and better schools, and then eventually got into a school that was, I thought, respectable, and where I was actually getting really interesting work, working with very interesting students. And after doing the Delta, which is this second level, it's kind of like doing a master's for English language teaching to adults. After doing that, it really locked in for me, and I really got into it in a much more serious way. And also it became a kind of outlet for a lot of other things for me, like being creative. I started to write my own lesson materials more and more, and I got really into that side of it. Started to use the classroom as a platform for more creative things, like finding ways to make my lesson plans incorporate sort of original things, like humour and stories and stuff like that. So I really started to get into it.
And did your podcast appear somewhere near this moment?
Exactly. It was in that phase. And it was at this school I was working at. They gave me a special responsibility for using technology in the classroom. So it was my kind of like side job at the school to research these things and to give presentations to other teachers about them and look at how technology could be useful in what we did. And one of the things that I was given was to investigate podcasting, because it was a new thing. We're talking about 2008, 2009, right in the early days of podcasts when there were almost no podcasts around. And I did an online training course in the basics of podcasting. And at the time, people thought, including my boss, they thought, well, how can we use podcasting in classrooms? And they thought that we would somehow be giving the students projects where they would be making their own podcasts. So I investigated this, but then I realized, wait a minute, I can actually make my own podcast. And I'd recently bought a laptop computer, which had an inbuilt microphone in it, and it had GarageBand, which is a sort of audio editing software. And I realized, oh, wait a minute, I can make my own MP3s. And in this laptop, it was an old Apple Mac from years ago. It also had all these royalty-free jingles, right? These are little bits of music that you would put at the beginning and the end of a radio show or something. And so I took one of these royalty-free jingles, made my own podcast jingle. You're listening to Luke's English Podcast. For more information, blah, blah, blah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Really?
But that's not the jingle I've got now. No, the jingle I've got now is made by a friend of mine. I asked him to make me some jingles, and I just put that at the beginning and then did my stuff in the middle and put the jingle again at the end. Thanks for listening to Luke's English Podcast. For more information, blah, blah, blah. And then that was it. And I learned how to upload it to this website that allowed my podcast to be broadcast out so that iTunes and other bits of software could grab it. And then I was able to self-publish these audio shows. And then I was away because that was really great. That's kind of like what I'd always dreamed of, really. The realization I could just do it on my own in my bedroom was amazing. And that's really how it became useful for learners, that it was just a really great way to listen to English rather than making them themselves, although that arguably is a good idea too. But it really was a way for them to access things to listen to and to get more listening practice into their lives. And I thought, right, well, that's what I can do. I can, make a show that is for learners of English to help them learn English through listening, and still doing it.
And now it's more than 1 million subscribers and listeners. And how many downloads you reached?
Sort of lost count over the years, but it's something over 150 million downloads. But I mean, when you think about it, I've got nearly 1,000 episodes. So what's 150 million divided by 1,000? It's about 150,000, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that just means that on average, my audio episodes get about 150,000 downloads, which is, it's decent. It's strong.
I'd say so.
It's strong. I mean, obviously there are podcasts out there that get a lot more than that, but that's great. So I'm extremely happy with that I kind of built up my own audience, and I've built this thing which is just perfect for me because it's a way to express myself, be creative, and do something beyond teaching. Teaching is wonderful. You get one of the best things is working with other people closely. That's brilliant. But you look at your life and you think, right, so I'm in the classroom 30 hours a week. It's quite hard. It's quite hard work. Students come and go. You just get new students and you have to start again with them. And you just sort of like, in a way, feel a bit like a hamster in a wheel. it's quite brutal and quite hard work. And not that many teachers carry on in that cycle. They find ways to,
To
escape, I suppose, or to do something else in the industry. And those options are fairly limited. Either you become a manager of a school, a senior teacher or manager of a school, which is something that never interested me. I didn't want to just be the guy who put too many students in your classroom. That's just not interesting to me at all.
Yeah.
Or you go into publishing, and that just seemed to be very closed to me. Like maybe materials writing, which is what I was thinking of before I started doing the podcast. Like, how can I get a course book published through Oxford University Press? And I just never really grabbed me. But then this podcasting thing started off as just a fun thing I was doing, because in 2009, there was no podcasting industry. There was just nothing at all. And monetization of podcasts was just like not a thing. But I just kept doing it because I enjoyed it. And really, I didn't start making any money from doing it years and years after I actually started the podcast initially, because I enjoy it too much. But in the end, it has become a kind of a more viable career for me than just being in the classroom, which is great. And I, again, feel very lucky.
But still, you can now say that you're a teacher and podcaster like Thompson, or you have some thoughts that you're just going through a phase and you want to try something completely different in the future.
I don't know. I don't know what else I would do. Again, I never know. I never, ever know what I want to do. It's very frustrating. I don't have these long-term visions. It's really annoying. But I don't really know what else I'd rather do than make content for learners of English, to be honest, with sort of skills and experience I've got. Maybe I'll stop teaching entirely and just do the podcast, but I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket, to coin a phrase. And also, I don't want to leave the classroom entirely because I enjoy it. It gives me human contact and also sort of keeps me fresh as a teacher. So being in the classroom a lot allows me to keep my teaching skills refined. But then I do spend most of my time podcasting, so that's the main thing I do. So really, I'm a podcaster first these days and then an English teacher.
You're also teaching through podcasting, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. But that's a bit of a strange one because, I do my best to try and teach through the podcast, the medium of a podcast, but it's very restricted. It's a bit like, imagine your classroom, you've got your classroom of students, and normally I would be there with them, but being on the podcast, it's like they're in a room and I'm all the way down the corridor and I've got this very long tube, or they're on the end of a telephone.
Which is muted, yeah.
Yeah, they're muted. And I'm just speaking to them on the end of a telephone and they're in a room all the way down the end of the corridor. Hello, everyone. So welcome to the lesson. Today we're going to be doing this. Are you still there? Hello? Right, well, I guess I'll just carry on anyway. I have no idea if you're listening to this. So it's totally different teaching on the podcast. So instead, what you have to do is you have to just really keep people engaged, just keep people listening. And it does mean you have to make it into a sort of an entertainment show, but that's fine. It is a podcast after all, and that's what it's supposed to do, is to entertain and just keep people listening.
Yeah, and that's one more challenge for the author as well.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a challenge to try and adapt my experience of being a teacher to that scenario. But the rules are different. Mm-hmm. In a classroom, I'm totally different because the parameters are different and the rules are different. For example, I'll try not to speak as much as I do when I'm on the podcast, of course. So I'll do my talking, but then I'll stop and do lots of listening and allow the learners to talk and stuff. Whereas on the podcast, obviously I have to be talking all the time. And all sorts of other things. Like, it does fit in with certain ideas about learning a language, like the idea that consuming a lot of English, either by reading it a lot or listening to it a lot, is a really important part of the process. You do have to consume a lot of English to really learn it, as well as using it and all the other things we've said before. I used to say to my learners in classrooms, I'd say, so what, as well as the work we're doing in the class here, what else do you do for your English? Like, hands up if you're reading anything at the moment, and a couple of people put their hands up. Hands up if you are watching a TV series at the moment. A couple of people put their hands up. Hands up if you're listening to the radio or listening to a podcast. And it's rare that people would put their hands up. In fact, it was very rare, really, that people told me that they were doing any listening practice beyond what we were doing in class. So I thought, well, at least I'll try and give them something they can listen to.
And you succeed.
Well, yeah, I guess. But I think that still out there, most people are not listening to my podcast. Most of the people learning English out there are not listening to me.
But that's the goal.
Yeah, I want everyone. I want them all.
It sounds like the good goal for your podcast. I just wanted to say that just please be sure that we're answering you. We, as your listeners, are answering your questions, despite the fact that we are muted.
That's great.
Just remember that, yeah.
That is great to know. I always need to be told that. I always need to get that kind of feedback. It's really important that I know that there is someone out there on the other end of the line. Because in my mind, after I've been talking for a long time, like I've been doing on your podcast today, I kind of think, well, surely they're all just skeletons with headphones on.
I'm pretty sure they're not.
Yeah, I hope not. Who knows?
We tried our best, at least.
Indeed. If you're still listening to this now, then congratulations. Well done, you. I'm very impressed.
Yeah, same for me. And we've reached the final and traditional part of these podcasts. In Russian, it's called baechki. And I have absolutely no idea how to translate that into English, but the closest I've come up with is funny little stories or so. Anyways, in this part of the podcast, guests share funny, scary, or just entertaining stories from their jobs. And the first thing I want to ask here is, what is the most memorable moment in your whole teaching career? The one you maybe carry deep in your heart since the moment it happened? Or maybe something so funny that you'll remember that till the end of the days. Could you please share that?
Yeah, sure. So we were talking about my career journey and stuff, and I was talking about how certainly in the early days, after I'd been in Japan and come back to England, and I wasn't sure about what I was doing with my life, and I still wasn't really sure about the job, and also the way that TEFL teachers are undervalued. So I was in this weird zone. I had to go through quite a few fairly kind of rubbish teaching jobs before I finally managed to get something good after I'd done my diploma. And I just remember one experience which just gives you an idea of the conditions that I had to teach in. So I was teaching at this one school and the classrooms were in really bad condition. And I was having to teach with a whiteboard, right? That's the thing on the wall that you write on with a pen. And the whiteboard was in terrible shape. Because if a whiteboard is very, very old, then eventually it doesn't work very well anymore, right? The surface is kind of scratched or worn down. So I was trying to write on this whiteboard in front of this group of students in this freezing cold room at the top of this building. I was writing away, struggling on this wall. And the whiteboard just fell off the wall in front of everyone. It just crashed onto the floor and clattered down onto the ground. And I had no choice. I had to just carry on teaching without a whiteboard, and I just ended up writing directly on the wall itself. And the funny thing was that the wall was painted with a kind of gloss paint, right? You get these different types of paint. So that it was a gloss paint on the wall. And ironically enough, it worked much better as a whiteboard than the actual whiteboard that originally had been there. There was an area on the wall where the paint was clean. All around it was all dirty and grubby, all around where the whiteboard had been. But the space where the whiteboard was no longer there was like this perfect shiny paint. And it worked really well. I was writing directly on the wall and rubbing it off and writing more stuff. So that was a weird one. I've taught in all sorts of weird little situations. I remember once teaching essentially in a cupboard because the school ran out of space, and so I got shoved into a little tiny room. It was the computer room, but it was so small I had to squeeze all my students in here and me and a little whiteboard that I was propping up against the door, and we were all in there, and literally our knees were all touching each other. We're all squeezed in together with our knees against each other. Ooh. It was a bit too
quite delicate,
a bit too intimate. And the whiteboard was here, and any time anyone came into the room, and obviously loads of my students were late, they would open the door, which would slam the whiteboard against the back of my head. So I'd be trying to teach. So, all right, everyone, how are you? How was your morning? Whack! Oh, all right, yeah, we're in here today. Yeah, just come in, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, gosh.
So I had a lot of those sorts of things.
That's really funny. But that didn't stop you, right?
No. Just carry on. You just got to, what choice have you got? You have to just carry on. But also working with learners of English from around the world. When I was teaching in London, we'd get these groups of students, everyone's come from a different country and they all end up in your classroom. And so that was quite interesting from a sort of human behaviour point of view. You end up observing the best and worst of human behaviour as all these people are shoved in a room together and they have to spend 5 or 6 hours in that room together every day for a few weeks. It's a recipe for disaster, isn't it, in a way? But it's not just that people disagree, although that does happen, and I've seen people have actual big arguments before. These days, I don't care. Like these days, maybe it's because I'm in France, and sometimes you see French people arguing, and there's nothing more entertaining for me than watching French people have an angry argument with each other. It's just the best. I remember once in the current school I'm in now, 2 of the students sort of grew to hate each other over the course of a few weeks, until one day one of them came in and didn't say good morning to the other one. And then he was furious. And they had a big shouting match in the classroom. I had to talk to them like they were kids. I was like, are you finished? Have you finished? I will not tolerate this kind of behaviour in my classroom. If you want to carry on I was loving it, absolutely loving it. If you're going to carry on like this, I'm going to have to ask you to leave,
That was the moment when you call yourself a teacher, Luke.
I was like, yes, I've made it. They were like grown men, older than me. And the class ended and they both went off and ended up having a huge row in the toilet. They went into the toilet and you could hear them shouting at each other in French, like really, really shouting hard at each other. And all the students from my class were all like leaving and we're all having a good laugh about it as they were all going like, I can't believe these two, they're so childish. But yeah, anyway, you see all sorts of stuff, but also just like strange stuff when you get people from different cultures combining and you get strange responses. Like once a learner, it doesn't really matter where the person is from, but you can just imagine this is a person from somewhere utterly different. A student came up to me and said, teacher, I have a question. Why are you so white?
Pardon?
Why are you so white? I was like, I don't know. Like what do you mean? White, like culturally white? I don't know. Or I think the person meant, why are you so pale? Like your skin is why is your skin so pale? Are you okay? I suppose it was kind of like, are you all right? You seem a bit off colour today. But that wasn't the question. I don't think that was the motivation. It was more just like, I'm just kind of disturbed by your appearance. I just can't understand this. And I need to ask you, why are you so white? I don't know how to answer that question. I'm sorry. And I've also had, why are your eyes so close together? As well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just the way I was born. Sorry. And a friend of mine who I used to work with, Andy, once a student came up to him at the end of the class and came up to him and said, teacher, I have a question. He said, yeah, what is it? And she was apparently quite concerned. She said, your eyes, they're so deep in your skull. She said to him. Yeah, they're so deep in your skull. And he replied saying, well, okay, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because it wasn't clear. Like the intention that she had, like, is this good or bad? And she just went, yes.
The best answer in this situation.
Like, what? Well, okay. Well, see you tomorrow. Bye-bye. Don't forget to do your homework.
It's good, but in a disturbing way.
Yeah, lots of weird, disturbing encounters where it's just like, what? But for some people, they've travelled across the world and things are different, including the way people look. People look different. A lot of students said that to me over the years, like, teacher, you look tired. Are you tired? I'm like, no, I'm all right. I feel okay.
Oh.
It's just because, I don't know, like I do have sort of, you can see I've got slight dark rings under my eyes. I don't know if you can see that. I do have a little dark patch.
Who doesn't, I guess?
But who doesn't? Well, maybe some people don't, maybe that's not completely normal for some people.
Good for them.
Some people have that. And maybe if I'm a bit tired and it's the middle of winter because I'm English, yeah, maybe I'm going to be a little pale skinned and I'm going to have a slightly darker rings around my eyes if I'm a bit tired because I've been teaching, I've been slaving away really hard trying to teach these students the present perfect continuous passive verb form. And I'm like, okay, right, it's break time then. Okay, I'll see you in 15 minutes, okay, everyone? And the student comes up and is like, teacher, you're very tired. you have dark rings under your eyes. I'm like, okay, thanks for letting me know. See you in 15 minutes.
Yeah, the same thing. I'm always get the "Are you mad at me?" question, just because my face can look like, there is an expression of Slavic face.
Oh,
If you ever heard that.
I haven't heard of Slavic face.
It's like the face when it has completely no emotions on that. Something like this. So, yeah, for listeners, I just try to make this Slavic face. And for me, that's the moment when my face is resting while I'm thinking or something like that. So that's the usual expression on my face.
Yeah.
And it looks a little bit angry, probably, or judging or something like that. So I'm always get the question, are you mad at me or something?
Well, yeah, that's also cultural. That's also
Yes.
cultural as well, isn't it? Yeah, I've had that as well because I probably spend a lot of time smiling. It's just naturally I end up smiling a lot. And I've had some students like, oh, you love smiling, don't you? You're always smiling. Why are you smiling so much? It's like, well, it's just being happy. What's
That
what's
could be a
wrong?
Slavic question, actually.
Well, yeah,
Sorry.
Russians. I've had Russians saying that. Yeah, you like smiling. You're always smiling, huh?
What's your problem?
And smiling back at me and making a big deal about it. Why are you always smiling? It's like, well, I'm just happy. Sorry. Sorry for smiling. Jesus.
Please don't be happy around Russians.
Yeah, that was definitely a
Just
Russian.
please
who asked me
behave.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've had all sorts of weird experiences like that. Yeah, there you go.
And just to finish all that up, I want to do the most teacher thing ever in this podcast. I'd like you to ask, I'd like to ask you, my English is not English anymore, to name a word or term you use most often in your lessons or maybe in the process of creating the podcast, and explain that term in simple words. Like, it could be either something funny or serious, your choice.
I was trying to think about this and thinking of the different things that I could talk about, like maybe the word lesson plan, which obviously is the thing that you write before you go into a class and then throw out of the window when you actually start teaching. But I don't know, I was trying to think of a teaching term that perhaps the teachers talk about quite a lot. And the thing that came to mind was the expression to activate learners' schemata. Have you ever heard that?
Never.
Activating the learner's schemata.
Sounds like a curse or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Or this Harry Potter vibes.
Yeah, right. A kind of a magic spell. So this is the sort of thing that my fellow English teachers in the teachers' room would always joke about because it sounded so technical. It's a term that we all learnt from doing our Delta course, where you go into extreme academic detail about teaching methodologies. When you're writing your lesson plan, you have to write the activity, the time it's going to take, 4 minutes, the interaction, whether it's between you and the students or the students and each other and stuff. And then you need to justify why you're doing that activity at that moment in that particular class with that particular group. And so often it's like, basically introduction will be ask students how they are. Justification, activate learners' schemata is the justification. So basically it just means to get the students interested and engaged in the topic that you're talking about. So if it's going to be a lesson about food, it's like, what's your favourite food? And the justification is because you're activating the learner's schemata. So it sounds impressive when basically it's just, asking them a question to get them interested in the topic of the lesson. But it's just how to make something quite ordinary sound very impressive and academic. So there you go, that's one. That's a technical term, an insider term from the teacher's room. So if you've ever felt suddenly engaged in a lesson, because that was planned. That was planned. Your schemata has been activated.
Next time I'll feel pretty engaged. Yeah, I'll try to feel the schematas.
Just feel the schemata being activated one by one.
Yeah, that's really funny. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And actually, yeah, that's it. I ran out of questions and it was a really great pleasure to have such a conversation. And I want to say thank you so much, Luke, for your time and dedication. Really appreciate that.
That's all right, no problem. Thanks for inviting me onto your show. Hope people have enjoyed listening to this, even though it was all in English. Hope everyone survived.
Yeah, I hope too. And you'll be listening for the next episodes of my podcast or Luke's English podcasts.
Sure.
That I highly recommend.
Thank you very much. It's nice of you.
Thank you, Luke. We'll be really happy if you stay with me and continue listening to the new episode of Cam я стал, когда вырос podcast, especially if you can listen content in Russian language or even if you learn in Russian. Welcome. I would be really happy having you here. So please join, click subscribe, share it with your friends, add likes, stars, hearts, and all that stuff that can help me know how do you like this episode and if I should do more specials like this. Please don't hesitate to let me know what you think. And thank you very much for your attention. See you in the next episodes. And bye. Thank you.